getting back into it. I'm actually a little nervous, so that's pretty crazy. But I'm thankful that we have the opportunity and the place to come together and to start this new series called Broken Homes. This series, I've had this series in my mind for really a long time, ever since I saw the show Arrested Development. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's a show about dysfunctional families. Now, I know you know nothing about that, but what's funny about dysfunction, I mean, really, this whole series is all about this: how to make a broken home whole. Now, if you've ever seen, if you have ever seen Arrested Development, you know that there's this guy named Michael. He's one of the kids, adult kids of this family. And in the series, they, like everyone, except kind of Michael, except eventually you find out Michael too, is just completely and totally dysfunctional. They are totally messed up. And you're like, wow, this family is hilarious. Or if you're Ross Perot, this family is hilarious. Some people from the 90s will get that. We're done with that series, Marty. But Michael, it's his kind of job. He's kind of the do-gooder. And it's his job, he believes, to fix this family. And so he works really hard at fixing the family. And there's a couple scenes actually that I was thinking about that I think are really funny. First of all, Michael was talking to his mother, who she had gotten mad at Michael, so she put Buster in charge. And Buster was the youngest son, and he had some issues going on in his life. And he was one of them was he was super nervous, and so Michael was talking to his mother, and she was mad at him because something didn't get done. And so she kind of confronts him, and he says, "Oh, I thought Buster had everything under control." And then he looks at Buster and says, "Buster, I thought you were going into the office. What happened?" And Buster says, "Yes, I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed going. It's just that I was constantly being called to the phone, or I was asked a question, or I was being resuscitated, and it was really hard to get a good workflow going." Went differently in my mind, that joke. And then there's this other time where their dad went to jail, and so they're all sitting out in the jail lobby, and Michael goes in and checks out on their dad, and comes back out and says to the family, "Hey, look, everybody, it seems like they're going to keep Dad in jail till they get all this figured out, and they're going to stop the company expense account." And the family gasps. And Michael says, "Well, I would have kind of expected that after they're keeping Dad in jail part." But he's this guy that it's his job to fix. Now, over the years, and I've been a pastor now, assistant-wise and on for 15 plus years. And over the years, as I've talked to families, what I've found is everybody's family has a bit of dysfunction. If your family has a bit of dysfunction, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, most of it, right? Now, here's the great thing about this. As I talk, and myself included, as I talk to people and as they talk to me, what I find is I always talk to the Michael Bluth character. I always am talking to the person whose job it is to fix everybody else. I'm always talking to the normal one. Isn't that crazy? Like the luck that I have in having these conversations with the normal one is amazing. I never talk to the dysfunctional ones. I never talk to the ones that are like that seemingly are don't know what's going on and everything's going bad. I only talk to the normal ones. And so what I want to do over this series called Broken Homes is I want to teach you, as I'm trying to teach myself through Scripture, how do we, as the Michael Bluths of the world, how do we take our broken homes and make them whole? And by the way, I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about spiritually. Because here's the thing, I believe that when you begin to fix things, first of all in your own life, and then in your family's life, spiritually, Things aren't perfect, but things begin to take form in ways that you never thought. Unity in your house would begin to take place in ways that you never thought possible. But I think that starts spiritually. And so that is so important. So over the next 4 weeks, we're going to take a look at how do we build a strong spiritual home together as a family. First of all, you have to put up the foundation. That's what we're going to look at today. The foundation. That's super important. If you've ever built a home, which I haven't, it's important that it starts with a foundation. You have a good, strong foundation. We're going to look at this today and look what Jesus had to say about the foundation. And then, if you watch the builders, they put up the frame or the style of the house. And that's important. We're going to look at that next week. And then, okay, everything's kind of put up, everything's built, you kind of move in, and the thing that's really important, that's a must, both physically and spiritually, are the household chores. And so we're going to talk about what that means. And then lastly, the overall energy or feel of the home. So we're going to take a look and break these down into 4 weeks. And I think at the end of this, we're going to have a clear picture of how if you are filled with a home of dysfunction, or if you know someone, of how we can grow both spiritually, but not just personally, also in our homes. Okay? So let's get down to business. Here's a quick question for you. Has anyone ever considered yourself or know someone in your family who's considered the black sheep?
Yes.
Okay, some of you are going, no, if you're really black sheep, you're going, boom, that's me, I am. Deal with it. Okay, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, I'm not the black sheep in my house, so I'd be going, yeah, I'm the black sheep, yeah. But like, if you're the black sheep, you're going, me, boom. Okay, get over it, you know? Right? So if you're the black sheep, right, typically you're considered that because occasionally, or all the time, you're going outside of the rules of your home, set by the people who are in authority in the home, right? And so they've said they have rules, you know, you got to be home by 7:30 or 6:30 on the weekends, you know, and we have rules in our house. And then the black sheep simply say, well, I hear your rules, I see your rules, but I ain't listening to your rules, including rules of English, right? I'm not doing it. And so these black sheep, they are typically considered, there's a word for this, they're typically considered rebellious. And they have a line where they no longer want to keep the rules, but they're considered rebellious. I have a sister, 2 sisters actually, but the one I'm talking about was closer to my age. Her name was Amy. I was going to be honest, I was very judgmental toward her growing up because I had a difficult time disappointing my parents. Apparently, she didn't. So, now, the interesting thing is, I was a couple years older, and we worked together at the same job. It was an upstanding, like a 5-star restaurant called Ponderosa. And I was a cook, she was a waitress. And the Ponderosas, you could always see, like people, like you could always see the floor if you were in the kitchen. So I would work there, and I was in the kitchen, I was cooking or whatever. And I typically, you know, my sister, very nice girl, and lots of guys wanted to date her, okay? And that, as an older brother, I was protective. So there'd be guys coming. There was this one time, I saw a guy and talking to her for a long time. I'm like, Amy, what are you doing? She's like, you're not my dad. No, but I know all his rules. And I would be glad to stinking share them with you. So one time this really happened. So she says to me, one time I get a little mad because she's like talking to this guy for a long time. I'm like, what are you talking to him for? Well, he asked me out. What? Now, at this point, I realized it was jealousy because I actually never got asked out. Right? And I was always too scared, right, to talk, I didn't ask anyone out. And so I was just sort of jealous. I was like, you can't talk, you're not supposed to go out on dates. you're like 15 or 16 or whatever she was at the time. And she's like, I'm like, that guy, he's probably not going to go anywhere. He's like, and I'm like, she said, well, how do you know? Because I know. I'm like, you don't even know his name. She's like, no lie. She said, yeah, I do. It's Charles Woodson. Think about that, football fans. He became a Heisman Trophy winner and a Super Bowl winner. But anyways, that's a true story. Clearly, I wasn't the judge of character I thought I was. So I was very, very judgmental. But here's the thing. Sometimes households are focused, and maybe this is true of yours, are focused on being good. But they have a terrible time explaining why. And when they don't communicate the why, people who have different habits, or who I might say have brains, would then say, well, then I don't have to do it. If you can't tell me why, then I don't have to do it. So consequently, we associate rebellion in our homes as teenagers who make bad decisions. Well, you'll be happy to know this morning that that is not the case for rebellion. If you're a teenager, be happy, be thankful. If you're a parent, you can hate me later. But it's really, rebellion is really a heart issue. As a matter of fact, I think I can develop the case scripturally that rebellion is any time, or you are rebelling any time that you put God second. That when you decide I'm going to put God behind money, you're rebelling. Parents, you can do that too. When you decide you're going to put God behind your hobbies, you're rebelling. When you decide you're going to put God behind your kids, you're rebelling. When you decide you're going to put God behind all of your stuff, you're rebelling. You see, that is a heart issue. And generations of Americans, Christians, have judged younger generations in their households because they weren't being very church-like. And that was all just fluff. Because God doesn't want you to be church-like. In fact, I think when you're being church-like, you're actually being God-light. You're building a foundation on appearances and not on God. Well, I want to appear like in some way ungodly according to the scriptures. So therefore, I want you and the rest of my household to act a certain way. Now, here's the thing. We really have to go back to why it's important to act a certain way. Why is it important? And how do we get away from this idea of rebelling, first of all, against God? Because parents and teenagers, you could be saying it's important for me to do this, it's important for me to live this way, and at the same time, rebelling against God. There's a story in 1 Samuel of this guy named Eli. And Eli was a priest. He was a priest, and him and his ancestors, all the way back for hundreds of years, were priests. In fact, God had said in the Old Testament that what I want is for this line, this family, to be my priests, okay, to follow me. And so, year after year, generation after generation, this family did the priesthood, and they followed God, and they made sacrifices for this nation called Israel. But all of a sudden, in this passage, this guy named Eli had two sons, and here's how the story goes. Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels who had no respect for the Lord or for their duties as priests. Whenever anyone offered a sacrifice, Eli's sons would send over a servant with a three-pronged fork, while the meat of the sacrificed animal was still boiling. The servant would stick the fork into the pot and demand that whatever it brought up be given to Eli's sons. In other words, they had their appetites. All the Israelites who came to worship at Shiloh were treated this way. Sometimes the servant would come even before the animal's fat had been burned by the altar. He would demand raw meat before it had been boiled so that it could be used for roasting. The man offering the sacrifice might reply, "Take as much as you want, but the fat must be burned first." Then the servant would demand, "No, give it to me now, or I'll take it by force." So the sin of these young men was very serious in the Lord's sight, for they treated the Lord's offerings with contempt. But Samuel, though he was only a boy, served the Lord. He wore a linen garment like that of a priest. Each year his mother made a small coat for him and brought it to him when she came with her husband for the sacrifice. Before they returned home, Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you other children to take the place of this one she gave to the Lord." And the Lord gave Hannah 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now Eli was very old, but he was aware of what his sons were doing to the people of Israel. He knew, for instance, that his sons were seducing the young women who assisted at the entrance of the tabernacle. Eli said to them, "I have been hearing reports from all the people about the wicked things you are doing. Why do you keep singing? You must stop, my sons. The reports I hear among the Lord's people are not good." If someone sins against another person, God can mediate for the guilty party. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede? But Eli's sons wouldn't listen to their father, for the Lord was already planning to put them to death. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew taller and grew in favor with the Lord and the people. Here's the thing. So Eli had his sons, and he was super, and it was his job to keep them in line. But you say, well, wait a minute. Why couldn't he stop them? What we find later in this next passage, and we're going to read this, is that it wasn't so much that Eli couldn't stop them, but Eli came to the point where he was apathetic, where he really didn't care. We find it here. One day a man of God came to Eli and gave him this message from the Lord. "I revealed myself to your ancestors when the people of Israel were slaves in Egypt. I chose your ancestor Aaron from among all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer sacrifices on my altar, to burn incense, and to wear the priestly vest as he served me. And I assigned the sacrificial offerings to you priests. So why do you scorn my sacrifices and offerings? Why do you give your sons more honor than you give me? For you and they have become fat from the best offerings of Israel." In other words, in some way, you, Eli, have benefited from the post that I have put you in. And you have come to the place where you just don't care anymore. Here's what the man said. "Therefore, the Lord God of Israel says, I promised that your branch of the tribe of Levi would always be my priest. But I will honor those who honor me, and I will despise those who think lightly of me." Now notice what the prophet said here. "I will despise those who think lightly of me." Doesn't say, "I will honor those who honor me, and I will despise those who dishonor me." It says, "I will despise those who think lightly of me." In other words, the person doesn't go after, Eli, the man of God, isn't talking right now to that person or those people who dishonor or who don't care about God. The person is going right after, and the messenger of God is going right after the person who goes to church every week and who takes him lightly. Who decides, "I want to be a good person, but I'm just kind of doing it for my own good feelings." For the person who says, "Oh, I just want to serve and just kind of be a good moral person." And God says, no. The messenger of God says, no. Eli, what's most important is not about what you're actually doing, but it's about why you are doing it. It's that you would look at Almighty God who created you and who loves you. And you'd say, "I am surrendering myself to you," that it is not out of apathy. That in your home, that you have rules. and you write those rules down, and you share them with your teenagers, and you share them with your friends, and you want your household to be one of a godly one, and a loving one, and one of peace and hope, but that you don't just do it for peace and hope, but that you would do it because you understand the importance of a God who is awesome, a God who is powerful, a God who is wonderful, but who commands respect. And here's why that is. Here's why this is so important. It's so important because if you take God lightly, if you take God kind of like, I just want to do this thing. I'll occasionally go to church. I'll occasionally kind of get involved or be nice or be nice to my neighbor or whatever. If it's kind of like haphazardly, like just kind of whatever, then ultimately what's going to happen is when bad things take place, the first thing you're going after is God. God, I blame you. Or here's another one. I don't even believe you exist anymore. Isn't that interesting? That's the first thing. Why? Because your entire faith is built on sinking sand. It's built on appearances. And all of a sudden, if your appearances are shot and your life looks horrible and stuff is going messy and everything's miserable, the first thing you're going after is God. I no longer believe in you. Why? Because you built a foundation built on complete rebellion in the first place. Jesus said, he was teaching he was given a parable in Matthew chapter, I believe it was 4. Matthew chapter 7. And he's teaching. And he says this, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. It's like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. I will despise those who think lightly of me, but I will honor those who honor me. I will honor those who honor me. And you can say it this way, I will honor those who honor me before anything else. In other words, if you put me first, I will honor you. You know what what word comes to mind when I think of that line? I will honor those who honor me before anything else. The word is surrender. Surrender. And this is the most critical, important aspect of your life. Not just your individual life, but your family life. You see, kids eat up an unsurrendered life, a rebellious life. Oh, I could see it growing up. Times when my parents, and they were awesome and they were wonderful, but I saw times when they wavered in their faith, or when they wavered in their lives, or when they wavered in their church life, or their servitude, or their hearts. I saw that. And that went through my mind. Now, then Jesus comes. And he says, hey, you want to build a house, a foundation on wisdom? Don't build it on foolishness. That's going to sink. Now, here's what we know about Jesus. He wasn't teaching a new law. Right? He wasn't coming off and saying, obey his rules, right? Because anyone in our world, right? And you know this, I don't want to go to church. Church is boring. Of course, I haven't been to Fellowship Church. Church is so boring, right? Some of you are waking up for that. What's going on? Church is boring. I'm just going to go to hell. And that's where my friends are going to be. We're going to drink together. That's so creative. I only have heard that 8,000 times. That's cool. No, listen. Rules are only important when it is important to be right. But Jesus came in, and he didn't offer a set of rules. Jesus offered something much more beautiful and wonderful and awesome than that. Jesus was teaching us about the beauty and glory and wonder of grace and forgiveness. He said, our new way to get to God, your new way to get to God, Marty, is not by following this rule. Because what we've found is that if you think you can follow the rules, your idea to get to God is built on the foundation of pride. And so Marty, as a teenager, thinks, wow, I'm better than her, Amy, because I obey the rules. God likes me so much. I am so spiritual. Ah! Too bad we don't have special effects. I could do some lighting or something when I do that, right? Maybe next week. But his new way to get to God, to truly understand who God is to step outside of yourself and to take on the person of Christ, who gave his life for the world, who looked at him and spat on him and crucified him, and then turned around and said, I love you, I forgive you, I'm pouring out grace onto your life. Well, let me tell you about this person in my family did this to me and blah, 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 blah. I love you. I forgive you. I'm pouring out grace. And all of a sudden, Jesus just taught us, here is how to build a foundation, not only in your personal life, but in your family life. I love you. I forgive you. I'm pouring out grace. And we begin to see who God is by looking at the person of Jesus. Man, for so long, I grew up thinking, if I just act the right way, if I listen to the right kind of music, if I have, honestly, the right hairstyle until I didn't have any hair anymore, everything is going to be all right with God. And in a sense, Jesus told spiritual person after spiritual person after spiritual person, listen, you are building a foundation on foolishness, and it is going to sink. When you want to spend an immense amount of money on that thing you really need, first of all, stop. Have you surrendered that? When you want to lash out and get revenge on that person who hurt you so bad, Jesus says, stop. Have you surrendered that? Do you know who God is, or are you taking him lightly in this scenario? Because I'm showing you who God is, and I'm showing you grace, forgiveness. When you want to prove to your spouse, or your teenager, or your parents that you are right and they are so wrong, have you surrendered that? Surrender. That's who God is. And that's what we see through the person of Jesus Christ when we surrender ourselves to him. I will honor those who honor me before anything else. As I get older, I have this great appreciation for my sister. Because here's what happened. I've gone through some of the same things that she's gone through in different ways. And I realize that I'm just as rebellious. That ever happened to you? You think to yourself, wow, I wish they acted a certain way. Man, oh man, I wish they were as spiritual as I am. Until all of a sudden you're not anymore. All of a sudden you're the one being rebellious. And I gotta tell you, when you're the one being rebellious, you can think of every excuse in the book. You can justify that junk, huh?
Amen.
Man, let me tell you why I did it. I'll give you a 3-point outline, Marty. So here's the thing. This week, as we build our home, first of all, we want to think about. I have a moving project for you guys. Okay, I just moved. That's awesome. When? Yesterday. So I have a project for us here. A moving project. There might be, I'm not saying this is true for you, but there might be a whole pile of things in your life that is in front of God, or that are in front of God. Right? What I want you to do this week, as we think about broken homes and how we can help to build our spiritual homes, not just personal, but our spiritual homes for our family, what I want you to do is evaluate this week those things that might be in front of God and work on moving them. You're like, well, how do I know? I have a little checklist here. And by the way, they're based on my life, so I'm not judging you if this is you. I'm just saying, me too. If you go a whole day or days without thinking, meditating, or praying to God, probably there's something going on that's in front of God in your life. If you drag your kids from place to place but can't drag your Bible out to read it, might be something place of God. If you desperately need money for this and that but can't commit to give finances back to God, might be something in front of God. If you can't wait for me to end this because of the game coming up after the church. I know I can say that. My game was Thursday and it didn't go very well. But if you can't wait for me to end this because of the game after the service. If you feel more comfortable gossiping about someone else or the church than you do talking about how good God has been to you, might be something in front of God. Surrender. I will honor those who honor me before anything else. Next week, we're going to talk about, you can't put up an amazing and strong foundation like we want to do as a church and what we want to do as families. You can't put that up, that amazing foundation, and then put up a crooked house, so a frame, right? Next week, we're going to talk about the frame. Thank you for being here. We're going to have some more music this morning, but I want to pray for you this week, or if you have anything that you want to talk about in terms of the foundation, feel free to talk to me after or this week, email me. This is something that as a church, we really want to work on. But it starts with surrender. Not surrender to Marty, not surrender to a church, surrender to a God who loves you and who has poured out grace and forgiveness in your life. Let's have a word of prayer.